his whole life becomes very tied to the Jedi and the Force. Hey everyone, welcome back to Rupees Over Ramen, the show where we talk about animation, creativity, the creative process, and tons of other nerdy stuff. So I am here today with my friend Christian. We're going to be talking about Star Wars, Rebels, and Rogues. So just kind of like that time period in between episode 3 and episode 4. Star Wars and like Lucasfilm and LucasArts have come in and just created all these different stories within that time period now, and it's really interesting seeing how all those fit together and like what each one is about. But first, let's give the audience like a little introduction to you and like your background with art and creativity. Like what kind of stuff have you liked to do in that realm of things?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I've been a Star Wars fan all my life. I've loved it, particularly became fond of it later, especially like during college. Absolutely love the lore. I love exploring the history of it. I love the characters, and I love the Clone Wars especially. I have not dived too deep into Rebels, but I understand some basic knowledge about it, and that's why we're going to talk about some callbacks in Rebels to the Clone Wars and how that influences some of the story in that. I was roommates with James. I was with roommates with James in college a while back, and we just grew close to be really awesome friends. As far as my experience with art, I've done a lot of drawing. So yeah, I have some experience with photography and making dumb videos with my brother, especially with like skits and things like that. And I love art. I love meaningful storytelling when it helps make life a little bit more colorful and awesome. I just love that.
That's sweet. That's really awesome. Yeah, Christian is one of the roommates that we watched Gravity Falls with. So if you guys have seen that episode that I did with Kyle, and then I did an episode on Avatar: The Last Airbender with my other roommate Scott. So now we got all of us on here. So it's pretty awesome. And I love Star Wars too. I like grew up actually in this room, in that under that staircase right there. I had like one of those little TVs with the VHS player in it, and I would watch Star Wars under there with tons of like blankets and pillows and stuff. But I only had episode 1 and then episode 4. So like the beginning of each trilogy. So I just like watch those back to back, see like the start of Anakin's story and then the start of Luke's story and be like, huh, this is an interesting like
That's cool.
experience. Yeah, yeah. I actually really liked episode 1.
Yeah.
I don't know if I love all the prequels, but yeah, we're not going to cause a fight
Yeah.
in the world.
But
But
episode one's low key pretty good, especially with like the fight scenes. And I just remember eating tortilla chips while watching the VHS tape.
yeah, yeah, no. Yeah, VHS. Those were the days. So, like Christian was saying, I'm gonna kind of be the resident authority on like Star Wars Rebels, and he's gonna give more of that side on Clone Wars because I have seen like a couple of episodes, but haven't really seen a ton of the Clone Wars. So he's gonna kind of connect the two together.
Yeah, I
It's
could say
in,
the same for Rebels as well.
yeah, yeah. So we're kind of one of us is coming. Each of us has like little knowledge in one thing and then a lot of knowledge in the other, and we're gonna come together. So it's interesting because both of these were animated in a very similar style. Some people don't like the Rebels style because they kind of made it more filmic and kind of softened edges a little bit. But the visual style of Rebels, I found this quote how it was inspired by the original Star Wars trilogy concept art by Ralph McQuarrie. And you've probably heard of him before. He did a lot of the concept paintings of like different areas in Star Wars. And there's one that I remember a lot. It's like the inside of the spaceship. And he did one for Chewbacca, I think. And Chewbacca looked very different in the time. But his art style is like
Yeah,
very.
there's like a stormtrooper with like a lightsaber. That was
Yeah.
supposed to be Darth Vader at one point.
Oh, interesting. I don't know if I've seen that art before. That's super cool. That's fascinating.
The stormtrooper was originally supposed to be Darth Vader, I believe,
Hmm.
with a lightsaber, and then Luke Skywalker was supposed to be a guy named Starkiller, and he wore a scuba diver mask. So that was supposed to be the original
Oh,
Luke
interesting.
Skywalker, but he was going to be named Starkiller or Jake Starkiller or something like that. I'm glad it
Interesting.
turned out different.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing a thing with Mark Hamill talking about being Luke, and he talked about when he read the script, it was called something Star Killer when they first saw it and when they were first getting like actors and stuff for the movie. For like the animation and look development, it was like part Ralph McQuarrie and then part
Mm-hmm.
actually Hayao Miyazaki. because I can't remember what her name is, but like the head of Lucasfilm, she still works there.
It's like Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah, Kathleen Kennedy.
Yeah.
She really loved Hayao Miyazaki's work and like his character design and his concept work. And they really wanted to have like this combination of those two amazing artists in this series. And I was very curious of like what it was animated in and what Clone Wars was also animated in. So I was doing some research and I couldn't find anything until I just like made a guess. I was like, was Star Wars Rebels animated in Autodesk Maya? And then all of these things came up about like the background of making it and something with like animating Darth Maul in Maya. And I was like, oh, okay. I've done once like one thing in Maya. I animated a character like breathing. I think you've seen it before. It's like Link. He's kind of breathing and chilling for a bit. So that took a good amount of time just for that little thing. But I did see like the power that Maya had. So, and it's industry standard for the most part.
What you're saying is that they'd use Autodesk Maya to do the animation for both shows. Okay, that's interesting. It's interesting because so the original idea is that George Lucas, when he owned Star Wars at the time, he wanted to create a television show for kids. So George Lucas was into things that people weren't necessarily thinking about at the time. So one thing that he did, this goes way back. So I don't know if you remember in like 2002 or 2003, but George Lucas and he had an animation team create a different show way before the Clone Wars called Star Wars: The Clone Wars. But this was all pencil drawn in the style of Samurai Jack, because he really likes the way that it looked, and it kind of represented a different side of Star Wars, and it was very kid friendly, even though the story is very like deep and it's a little crazy. But later on, he took on Dave Filoni, who originally worked with Avatar: The Last Airbender as far as the storytelling goes, and then they worked together to create the first Clone Wars movie, which was a kind of an odd choice because not necessarily everyone understood what was happening or like where these characters came from. And it was kind of an odd release in a movie theater. A lot of people didn't know if it was like another episode of Star Wars, but it was in a way, it was supposed to be a launch to the show. If you look at the animation style, it's very rigid. A lot of the characters are very straightforward. A lot of their jaw lines don't really match up with their speaking. And I don't think that's necessarily true. Their jawlines do match up with their speaking, but it's not as like natural and fluid. The characters' movements. I just think of like Captain Rex when he's trying to talk and stuff. His jawline moves up and down. That's what it appears in my head to be like. But they were pioneering something new. If you look at that in the last episode, in the last season of the Clone Wars, you can see a complete transformation over time, like from the first movie, the first episode, to the 100th episode, to the last episode, to Rebels and the Bad Batch. You can see this kind of shift and change from being super rigid to being very human-like and fluid. And in the duel between Ahsoka and Darth Maul in season 7, the final season of the Clone Wars, they actually used motion-capped suits for the fighters, for the martial artists. And it's very interesting how they went from there to the most recent one of the Clone Wars. And then if you watch the Bad Batch, you can see that there's a lot more fluid movement and things like that. So it's very interesting how they got way better over time as they learned how to work with it. I don't know if you've seen Tales of the Jedi or Tales of the Empire, but it's very similar to. So it starts out with like a very kid-friendly vibe, and then over time you can just see it mature into like more of like a gritty, dark, sad, depressing kind of deep atmosphere around it, and everyone's super fluid.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I don't know if you have any comments on that.
Yeah, no, especially so I've seen Tales of the Jedi, and I really love that, like seeing Ahsoka Tano's like story and seeing stuff with like Count Dooku. And I saw like trailers for Tales of the Empire, and it looks pretty intense. I haven't seen it yet, but it's interesting that you bring a Bad Batch, because I watched that show all the way through, at least what they have right now, and I was just like, dang, this animation style has come like so far, like the technology and stuff. I think the clone troopers have like the glowing visors. It's like blue, and it just like they have some really amazing like cinematic stuff in that show.
Yeah, and you can see like the shift from like the very first episode of the Clone Wars, where it's very kid friendly. There's a lot of like colors and things like that, to more of like a muted. And if you notice that there's a lot of lighting changes that have been made, and I feel like that's a wise decision that they've made, especially with like lighting on the faces
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
like the Bad Batch, for instance. There's a lot of like lighting and mood that they're really shifting and focusing on. There's like this one scene where there's like a scene. I don't know if you can pull it up in your podcast episode later, but
Oh yeah.
there's like a scene in the last season of the Clone Wars where Rex is talking to Darth Sidious, and this is right as Order 66 is about to happen. And you can see the lighting is coming from underneath Captain Rex, and it just comes across as like, oh, this isn't really Captain Rex. He's under the influence of someone else. And just the lighting tells a lot about the story of the character, what's going on through their head. And then you can see lighting. I don't remember exactly. I haven't seen the episode in a while, but the lighting changes where Captain Rex is struggling to shoot Ahsoka or not.
Mm.
And the lighting, I feel like, is really where the story is being told in the animation.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. And it was interesting because I saw the breakdown of a shot that was with Darth Maul in the Clone Wars.
Mm-hmm.
And just like before they put in the lighting, it just looked so like empty. But after just like that lighting pass of just some lighting artist going and putting in the lighting and doing
Yeah.
it like with purpose, like story
Mm-hmm.
purpose and like the emotions of the character, it just like totally changes the whole scene. It's
Yeah.
pretty.
And you can see the clash between blue and red in that last episode in the duel, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
it just looked so appealing to look at. You know, just like, oh my goodness, this is really cool.
Yeah, they speak really well with like color palettes and color schemes and using color and how it kind of ties into emotion. And it's
Mm-hmm.
interesting with what you said with the Clone Wars style improving because I saw that also with Star Wars Rebels. When it started,
Mm-hmm.
it was just kind of like, ooh, this is
Yeah.
not the style. But then like season 2 and definitely season 3, like they were really finding their stride. And I don't know if you've seen Dragon
Mm-hmm.
Prince, but it also kind of follows that same
I haven't.
improving of animation. So the writer of it like worked on Avatar: The Last Airbender, and
Mm-hmm.
it's on Netflix. But it starts out and it's 3D animated, and it just feels so like not fully animated, just movement of stuff. But over time, they're able to understand the tools better and understand the animation systems, be able to improve it. So yeah, it's pretty sweet.
It's so interesting, especially like we live in a world where like you notice like they do really well with the first episode, and then some, and then I've noticed this a lot where like with the first movie or the first episode, and the quality starts dropping over time.
Yeah, yeah,
With the animated aspect of Star Wars, it's the opposite, which I love. Where like they
yeah.
start figuring out like, okay, how are we gonna do this? And then they're like, okay, this is what we did last time. This is how we can improve. Even with like I know Battlefront gets a little bad rap, especially with its curse of not having a third installment. But like they started out with the first one, and they're like, okay, here's some improvements we could do, and then they put it in the second one. So I just love how like the creators of Star Wars, maybe people will disagree with the sequels, but we're not going to talk about that. But like, with like the animated part of Star Wars, that's the one I'm focusing on. Is it starts out with figuring out what we're going to do, and then later on it tapers to more of like, oh, this is getting better. This is what we know. I think the animators start understanding the story more, and they're like, okay, this is how we can convey that more, especially when the director or the head person is figuring out, for instance, Dave Filoni, when he's telling his creators, okay, this is the story we're trying to tell, portray it with this kind of lighting, or maybe having this kind of grit in it.
Yeah. Yeah, and talking about like the lighting just briefly, the CG lighting and effects supervisor was Joel Aaron, and he's actually the
Okay.
one who he narrates. I'll have to send you the video and probably put it in the show notes too. But he talks
Mm-hmm.
about animating Darth Maul and like how they did things with like the eye line, like to show like
Mm-hmm.
what his mental thought, like if he's super angry in this moment or if he's more
Mm-hmm.
reflective, and it allows you to connect more to his character. And yeah, and the voice actor for Maul too. I'm
Sam
trying.
Witwer.
Yeah, Sam Witwer. I like looked him
Yeah.
up. I'm like, that's the guy who voices Maul. And I saw a thing of him at like a. No, I wasn't there, but I saw like a video of him at like a Comic Con, and he like does
Yeah.
the Maul voice. It's pretty
Yeah.
impressive.
He has a lot of Star Wars knowledge. He's super passionate about his characters that he portrays. I don't know if you remember the Force Unleashed games. Do you remember those?
Yeah, 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 I do remember those.
So he was the mocap and voice actor for Starkiller in that, the main character.
Oh, okay.
And he was also the voice actor for Darth Vader and Emperor Palpatine as well.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah, he does a really good job. Yeah, he just has a huge passion for Star Wars. And then like he did the voice for Darth Maul, and he just comes across as very like dark and brooding and plotting, just like Darth Maul would be. I think he's done a bunch of other characters, but I don't know who they are. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I
just
think
wanted to put that out there.
no, that's cool. And that's the one I was trying to think of because they bring, like you said, like Luke kind of started out as his last name being Star Killer, but then they bring that idea
Mhm.
back with the Force Unleashed.
Yeah,
And yeah, and it's interesting how a voice actor can really put a lot of depth and character into a character. We're going to talk
yeah,
a little bit about like the different characters and voice actors. But one thing I wanted to say that was really interesting is one, you were talking about how like Clone Wars came out as a movie, and I found out that when Star Wars Rebels first like came out on like Disney Channel or Disney XD, it premiered
mhm,
as a 1 hour
yeah.
television film for season one, and then a 1 hour television film the next year for season two, and then a 1 hour television film for like season three. I just didn't know that, and it was
Oh
really
wow.
interesting to see that because I watched it as like a show. Like later on, I watched it on Disney
Mhm.
Plus. But yeah, it was really interesting to see how they did that, how they made it kind of this trilogy of films, like another trilogy. And one
That's
other
cool. I had no idea.
yeah, another thing is the main character, Ezra Bridger. He's like 14 or 15 in the series, and he was born on Empire Day. And one thing I didn't realize is it talks about the story. It says it was 14 years after the fall of the Jedi Order. I think it's about 5 years before New Hope, like before the
Mhm.
events of that. So Ezra Bridger was born at the fall of the Jedi Order, which is really interesting because he
Yeah,
becomes yeah, his whole life becomes very tied to the Jedi and the Force. And yeah, it's a very interesting thing. And in that show, like when Empire Day comes, like he's in this conflict of like, this is my birthday. This is like the day I was born, but then it's also the day that this galactic empire took over and has been oppressing the universe and stuff and the galaxy. So yeah,
yeah.
kind of crazy.
That's got to be an interesting like identity crisis in a way. Yeah, he's like born on the day where the empire rose, but also like that's his birthday. And it's like in a way it's like supposed to be happy and tragic at the same time. So I
Yeah.
guess that really describes, I don't know Ezra Bridger that well, but from what I've understood, he kind of struggles kind of the same way with Anakin, both the light and the dark, and in a lot of ways sometimes. So that could be a reflection of where he's at.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting because like Darth Maul becomes a huge part of the Rebels story,
Hmm.
and when Ezra meets him, he doesn't really know who he is. He's kind of like wearing a hood, and he's just kind of like Ezra's lost, and he needs a guide, and this hooded guide, he's like, I can guide you through. So he develops this connection to Darth Maul that you probably wouldn't see any other character develop, which is it's super interesting because you get to see this other side
Yeah.
of him. And yeah, and just like a run through of the characters, Ezra, and then Kanan Jarrus, he's kind of like the Jedi mentor, like the Obi-Wan.
Hmm.
And then Ahsoka Tano actually has a role in the show as well. And then on the crew of the Ghost, which is kind of their Millennium Falcon, if you will, they have like Sabine Wren, she's like Mandalorian, Hera Syndulla. I can't remember what the alien race is.
Twi'lek.
Yeah, Twi'lek.
Twi'lek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's what she is. And she has a really interesting past, and she actually shows up in some other Star Wars things. And then Zeb Aurelios, he's big buff like alien dude. And then Chopper. Chopper's one you've seen Chopper and like I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
he's in episode 4 of Star Wars, like the beginning when they first like see yeah. When they first see R2D2, like when they choose him, I think Chopper's like right beside him and they're about to choose him, but he's kind of a little messed up. And they're like, hey, like they're Luke is getting them from like Jawas, and he's like, hey, this isn't a good deal. Like this droid is messed up. And they choose R2D2 instead. So I think it was really interesting how Dave Filoni and like the Star Wars team, they're able to bring Chopper into his
See if I
own
can.
story and give him like a role and give him a life and like a background. And yeah. Thank you all so much for listening. Part 2 of Star Wars Rebels and Rogues is going to be coming to you soon. Will be the 64th episode of Rupees Over Ramen. See you guys then, about a week from now. Peace. Good times are ahead, so grab a nice hot bowl of ramen, some chopsticks, and join in on the discussion every month.